How to think outside the box. Hello, if you're new here, my name is June. I am a videographer of sorts, and this channel has to do with videography as well as just creativity, productivity, all that kind of stuff. It's still kind of a mess, I'm figuring it out. This is merely a video outlining my thoughts on the potential teachability of creativity. I'm in no way qualified to really talk about this topic, to be honest with you, but it's a topic that both infuriates me at times and intrigues me most of the time. So I thought I would share some ideas with you and see if it actually works. So to start off, if we have the phrase to think outside of the box, then I think it's worth considering what does it mean to be inside the box. Now, most of us obviously know what that means, but I think it's just a good way to kind of start the thought process. So inside the box, what types of thoughts come to mind? Playing within conventions, being safe, not offending anything or anybody, being predictable to a certain degree, and overall just familiar. So usually there are probably rules or structures in place or paradigms that you have to follow and play within those boundaries. There may be trends, things that are popular, or cultural norms, societal norms that you kind of follow and play within. So far, I think it's not really overly a negative thing. It's just the way things are sometimes. So the next thing after that then is we've established the box. What is thinking outside of it? So from a highly regarded and credible source, Wikipedia, this is the definition. It's a metaphor that means to think differently, unconventionally, or from a new perspective. This phrase often refers to novel or creative thinking. So obviously you probably already knew all of that. Thinking inside the box is just playing safe within the boundaries, within what's normal, essentially. Just being normal is thinking inside the box. Nothing wrong with it, it's just the way things are sometimes. Thinking outside the box, however, is generally regarded as positive. It's usually a new way of thinking or an unconventional way of thinking. It's bringing something new to the table, essentially. So because it's regarded as a positive thing, I'm sure many of us want to apply it more throughout our lives. There are definite benefits associated with thinking outside of the box, the most prominent one being that you stand out from the crowd. It's a very high compliment, if that makes sense. So for me and what I've been doing for work, I guess for the last couple of years, this has kind of been at the forefront of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to always think outside the box and offer up something new and creative. So over the years, I think I've picked up a couple of ways to prime my brain to begin to think in this kind of direction of being novel and unconventional. Obviously not great at this, and a lot of my ideas have been very fruity and terrible, but I think it is a matter of habit, and you gotta get started somewhere. And you're not gonna get it right 100% of the time. You're gonna have times where you feel like you're thinking outside the box, but really you're just, you're not that unique. So anyway, some ways you can do it. Number 1, change the goal of what you're trying to accomplish. So this comes from a video I just edited 2 days ago or so. There was a competition. It was a 15-second Instagram story edit for Will Carmack and Jesse Driftwood and Epidemic Sound. Now, I'm just coming off of a very high kind of phase of productivity, and I just didn't have it in me to be super creative or whip out a really good edit. But I still saw this as an opportunity to kind of stand out from the crowd and to be memorable in a sense, to at least be like in 5 years, if I do manage to kind of further this channel and what I'm doing here, to be like, oh yeah, that guy, he did that weird video like 5 years ago for that competition. So in this case, my goal may have initially been, I want to create something that's very cinematic or eye-catching or impressive and like witty or whatever, and try to actually win this competition. But being kind of creatively tired and not really being into that world of editing anymore, I adjusted my goal to just be a little bit louder, a little bit weirder, a little bit more, less professional work-minded, but more, I mean, to put it bluntly, I just didn't give a fuck. But I'll play the video here and you'll see that it's not really a video. It's kind of just like trying to make a statement. And that kind of segues into the second point, which is push buttons. To put it very simply, how can you get on the nerves of your intended audience? For me, the scenario that comes to mind is high school grade 11, I believe, English class. We were wrapping up a unit on The Handmaid's Tale, which from what I recollect was a very feminist novel. And there was nothing wrong with the fact that it was a feminist novel, and this had nothing to do with me enjoying or not enjoying the book. I think I was just bored at the time and wanted to push buttons. And for the unit exam, I think, the essay about this novel, I tried to argue my case that this was actually ironically a very anti-feminist novel. And I don't think my grade was that high, but I think I managed to get a B. And I do credit that to, I think, just the different nature of an essay. And this is kind of the common denominator for all of these, but you're trying to adopt the perspective of the person who is consuming your work or your essay in this case. They're going to have to read 30 essays and get through 30 of them. They're high schoolers. We're not going to be writing amazing pieces. Same thing with creating videos for brands. You're not going to create a masterpiece that goes viral every single time. The point is you're trying to adopt your audience's perspective and assume that they're going to be flooded with a whole bunch of similar content that are all equally well produced and equally entertaining and equally creative. So from that group, you're trying to deviate, you're trying to set yourself apart. And in this case, the way to do that is to kind of irk instead of please. So in my case, the audience was expecting an essay to outline the feminist qualities or principles throughout the novel. I decided to argue irony and presented the exact opposite, which can obviously, irk the person reading it, but then I feel like it's going to be more memorable regardless. Number 3 is very simple, and I see a lot of examples of it in pop culture or modern just media, and that is paying homage to something that has already been established as great and putting a fresh or modern perspective twist on it. So let's say you take something great from the 1970s, 80s, 90s, anything pre-social media, and now you're creating a video or a work of art that frames whatever was so great about that product in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and you're framing it in the lens of social media today, which did not exist in that time period back then. So in that sense, you're taking something that's already good and you're just kind of giving it a facelift. You're giving it an update so that it's more modern and more kind of in tune with the modern audience. And if well done, that's an easy way to kind of make something that'll pop off and is creative. The next one is a big one. It is using your cultural lens. So for me, being Korean Canadian, I come from this perspective of being in the middle, being in between two conflicting cultures. And I've used that and applied that to multiple things throughout my life, whether it just be my thought process or the way I handle new information, the way I handle social dynamics, or other things. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest, but that is one way, again, that you can bring something that's unique to you to the table and commentate or capture something in a way that is uniquely you and therefore novel. And the last one is also another easy way. It's to be interdisciplinary. So this kind of already has been touched on. I guess this is just another concrete way of thinking about it though. So I'm an English major, and let's say I have a gig or something with a client. I have to do a video, then I can just apply elements of literature to that video and voila, maybe I'll have something fresh and new and exciting. Other things that come to mind, maybe you are a programmer. You're very good at coding and you implement elements of that into your graphic design or your cooking, or just think of two things that normally do not go together, but you somehow make them work and gel together. That would be novel. That would be new. That would be creative. So those are 5 ways that we can begin to, set ourselves up for creativity and to be thinking outside of the box. And honestly, I think they are very easy to do once you wrap your head around it. It's almost like problem solving. You already have the equation. You know how to get there. Now it's just fitting the right pieces in and making it work. But now it's probably a good time for a word of caution. And that is something that I've learned over the years. And that is not always great to think outside of the box, especially if you're just doing it for the sake of it. And by that, I mean, it's not really motivated. It's just, you're just doing it because it's thinking outside of the box. For example, in my videography career, I did not hop on the zoom transition trend back in 2017 with the whole VHS and Super 8 film overlays. I tried to use my own unique flavors of overlays, and to be honest, I was dabbling in that before that became a big hit, so the way I did things looked different from the rest of people, which sounds good, but it wasn't really good in terms of, impressing clients. And nowadays, the whole epic B-roll thing inspired by Daniel Schiffer, who I love and really admire, but what he's done is set a trend, and not following that equation obviously will not get me brownie points with anybody anytime soon. The point here though is that perhaps we can add another parameter or another condition to thinking outside the box. So at the beginning of this video, we established that it's generally a commendable and positive thing to think outside of the box. But I've just outlined some examples such as that English essay or the fact that I didn't follow videography trends for clients. That is not always a great thing. So for me, that's dissonance. It doesn't make sense. So to make sense of it, I think to adhere with that definition of something that is positive and commendable and creative and noteworthy and novel, that thinking outside the box is just thinking outside the box. Like, it's like right outside of the boundaries of that box. You're not veering completely away. You're not visiting the next warehouse of boxes on the next continent or whatever. You are playing right outside the perimeter of that box. And if you stay in that area, then what you are doing is thinking outside of the box, being creative, being noteworthy, novel, and you can reap the benefits and all the positive things that come along with thinking outside of the box. Kind of going back to that homage thing, where you already have a very good established box, a framework, something that has worked in the past, and you're just adding your own flavor to it. You're adding your own spin to it. With the example of videography, maybe you do a zoom transition, but you just do it very well. When everybody else is just zooming into random objects, you actually zoom in from something A to B that actually makes sense. Like, you're still doing something new, but you're very much not at the same time. But it's okay because, hey, you're novel, and that's great. It looks creative. You're giving this semblance of thinking outside of the box. Anything more than that, I think we begin to get into the territory of, oh, it's very abstract, it's very unique, it's very different, maybe a bit strange. if not completely batshit crazy. And of course, those terms can be used both negatively and positively, but hopefully you get my drift. And just to elaborate a little bit more on that, thinking just outside of the box, it's essentially you're appeasing your intended audience. Like I said when I was talking about that essay, you're trying to adopt or tap into the mindset of the person who will be consuming your content or your work or whatever, your ideas. Whoever they are, they're going to have a kind of safe zone, an area or a box, if you will, of familiarity and what they are comfortable with. And you want to just take a step further away from that box, a single step, not a leap, just a couple of steps max, because in doing so, you're still outside of their, I guess, realm of expectation or what they may have thought of on their own, but you're still close enough that they feel familiar enough or comfortable enough with that idea to not be thrown off by it. And in this way, I think actually the interdisciplinary approach is probably the best of both worlds and a really good balance of proposing or introducing something that is very unique and new and different and maybe never seen before, but still familiar enough to be like, oh, that makes sense to me. And the reason for that in theory is because if your audience is familiar with both things, let's go back to that example, coding and cooking, combining the two makes no sense, but it still makes sense. Like, it's something that you can still wrap your head around and be impressed by. Maybe not the best example, but hopefully you get my point.